The Power of Kindness, a conversation on self compassion, leadership with Massimo Backus. Ever wish you were a little kinder to yourself? How could that make you a better leader? Join us on the Wellness Driven Life Show for an honest conversation with executive leadership coach Massimo Backus. He'll share his journey and practical wisdom on how self compassion can make a night and day difference in how you lead and live. Welcome to the Wellness Driven Life Show, where you're about to go on a wellness driven ride. Welcome, and let me share a little bit about the guests that we have here today. Massimo Backus is an executive leadership coach and author who empowers leaders to overcome self-doubt and reach their full potential through self-compassion. Drawing on his experiences, he provides practical guidance and actionable strategies as seen in his upcoming book, Human First, Leader Second. With extensive experience featuring in Fortune 500 companies, Massimo blends leadership development, behavioral science, and self compassion to drive lasting results for his clients. I am so pleased to help welcome to our stage today, Mr. Massimo Backus. Welcome.
Hi, April. Thank you so much for having me. It's really nice to meet you.
It's a pleasure to have you on the Wellness Driven Life Show. I'm excited to share your thought process of revolving around leadership with our audience and the self-compassion aspect. So let's get started by sharing a little bit more about yourself so the audience can get to know you more.
Yeah, I'm a flawed person just like everybody else, and I think that I've been very fortunate that the path that I've chosen in my life professionally has paired well with my experience. That's allowed me to see things in maybe a different perspective than other people do, and now my work around self-compassion is to help bring that to as many people as possible. Um, I was at one time seen as a sage on the stage, the kind of expert guru practitioner around leadership development, and lauded and praised for my performance. And at the same time, I was leading a team. I was a leader myself, and the feedback that I got from my team was very different than the feedback that I got from people that were in the audience or in my programs. And my team didn't feel psychologically safe with me. They described me as a bully at times. Really horrific information to receive, and no one attempts to do that. They don't wake up in the morning, particularly those in a leadership position, and want to create a work environment that's toxic in any way. And when I found out that that's what I was doing, I had to do some real soul searching to figure out how was this happening if it was so far away from what I intended. And it was on that journey, and we can dive into that more, April, but it was through that process that I learned one fundamental lesson that became an epiphany for me. And it was that I was so harsh and critical to myself that it became normalized, and I became numb to it. I didn't realize it. And in the process, I was negatively impacting other people. Something for people listening to think about is, if you treated other people the way that you treat yourself, what sort of friendships would you have? And I was treating myself in a way that I would have no friendships. I would have no relationships if I was treating other people the way that I treated myself. And there was some of that was eking its way through to other people. And that went against who I wanted to be and how I wanted to lead. And that has forever changed the way that I approach my day to day, and the values that I hold to be true for myself.
Oh my gosh. What an incredible story. And as a leader, that's like the worst feedback you can get, but it's such a incredible learning opportunity, right? When you all of a sudden have this mirror reflecting to you on things the reality and what needs to be changed. And so I feel like the self-compassionate aspect can't really come until you first have that self-awareness piece. And sometimes that doesn't hit us very hard until it is known to us from others, that others are letting us know that this is what they see and feel. So, what an incredible moment also, where you are leading so many people, and to be said that the thing that you teach and do is the thing that you're the worst at. I mean, my gosh, how would that make you feel?
It was an identity crisis. I was in disbelief. One of the biggest critiques of my behavior was that I was a really defensive person, which was, in hindsight, was absolutely true. But at the time, I I didn't understand it. I was like, "What do you mean I'm defensive?" And I would respond to people with, "I don't think that I'm being defensive. I think you're being defensive for telling me that I'm defensive," which, of course, in itself is being
It's
defensive.
being defensive.
And that's how far removed I was from the reality of it. And you just mentioned something, April, that I think is really important. Um, I hear more and more this emphasis on the importance of self awareness. And it is important, but it is by no means the finish line. To be self aware is it gets you to first base.
It's
And
the
you got to get
beginning.
to base a lot to score some home runs, but it is just the beginning. And I think we attribute self awareness to that experience of I'm open to feedback. I want to learn and grow. I'm aware of what my shortcomings are. I know what I'm good at. And that's kind of like level one self awareness. But to really understand how you're perceived by the people, regardless of whatever your intentions are, what is the impact of your behavior on others, which is what I, learned this very hard and painful way. And I resisted it at first because I was like, I don't see myself that way. So I couldn't internalize it. I couldn't adopt it for my own, even though it was objectively true. And what it required me is to push past awareness into acceptance, which is this is the reality of what's happening. I am behaving in this way. It is having this impact on other people. And once I accepted it, then I was able to move into the third piece of this, which really brings us around home so we can score some points for ourselves, is the accountability of, okay, well, now that I accept that I have done this, I've practiced forgiveness, and I've identified what I need to do to change, what am I going to do differently going forward? And so self awareness is critical, but it is just the first step. It does not solve things to just know that we're falling short. We have to do something with that information. And I wasn't able to do that. My clients struggle with doing that without self compassion because it's hard, scary work to look at our shadow sides, to admit the things about ourselves that aren't noble, that we wish other people don't know and we don't want to admit to ourselves. But with a practice of compassion and a practice of self kindness, we're equipped to go into the dark parts and know that we can get ourselves through at the other side.
Mm, those vulnerable pieces of ourselves are difficult to get to in the beginning, especially in a leadership role. We feel that everybody is watching and we have to lead perfectly and do everything right. And there's this ego attached to it. I love, Massimo, that you mentioned earlier on that it was a complete identity crisis, because that's exactly what it is, right? The stripping of the ego is the ego's identity of who we think we are and who we think that we should be, and how we are perceived to the world, by the world, etc., those societal standards. And coming out of that, especially, with the generation after generation of how we have geared ourselves as men and women and our roles in society, has not an easy one to break. And so, and coming into self-compassion, let's talk a little bit about that. What were some of the first things that you did in order to gain that? Let's say, let's move into self-love as well, because that compassion piece for ourselves is loving ourselves. So what were some of the first things that you did that were so moving to you that it was effective?
When I first got the news, I thought, well, I'm I'm a practitioner. This is what I teach and develop in others and other leaders professionally. So I've got the skills. I should be able to figure this out on my own. I just need to apply what I teach other people to myself. And I tried that for several months and was largely ineffective with it, because I was putting a band-aid on something. I wasn't actually getting to the root cause.
Mm.
And I was fortunate enough to be recommended to go to a retreat called the Hoffman process. And at that point, I went out of desperation. I was like, I don't know what else to do. I think I'm going to lose my job if I don't do this, and I can't figure this out on my own. So it was a real cry for help and a surrender of I'll do anything, I'll try anything because I do want to change this, and I just did not know how. And this retreat, and you mentioned something just a moment ago, April, about this is generational, and part of this retreat is the Hoffman process is about this concept called negative love syndrome, and it's a simple idea. It's that whether our parents meant to or not, they imprint certain things on us, and there are many good qualities and traits that we learn from our parents, but there's also some things that they didn't intentionally give to us that we observe, that we take on, and we might do those things in the same way, or we might rebel against them and do the opposite. But it's a coping mechanism. And so I learned that my defensiveness, and I wasn't just defensive in the workplace, you can ask my wife, I was defensive about everything. If she critiqued me or suggested I do load the dishwasher differently, I would get defensive about it. I mean, it was, in hindsight, it seems unbearable that she chose to live with me, and she still does. But the negative love syndrome and being able to trace back, where did I learn these coping mechanisms that potentially helped me at one time but were no longer serving me, allowed me to forgive my parents for that, recognizing that wasn't their intention, and recognize that they're human too, and they're flawed, and that they learned that from my grandparents, and so on and so forth. And as a parent myself, it gave me forgiveness to go, I probably have imprinted things on my son that we'll have to work on together. But we're now equipped to have that conversation and introduce him to some of the skills he can have, so maybe it doesn't take him quite as long as it took me. But it was at this retreat, probably on day 3 or 4, that I found myself on a break between a 90-minute guided visualization where I was in a sacred garden, talking to my childhood self. And I was a cynic of all of this stuff before doing it. I would have blatantly said, that's absurd. I'm a scientist. I have a degree in psychology. This is too far-fetched. It's too spiritual or wooey-wooey. That's where I was coming from. But on this walk, on this break, I remember vividly that I could hear in a way that was greater high fidelity than ever before. I felt the sun hit my skin and warm my body in a way that I'd never felt before. I could hear the leaves as the breeze was going through the trees. And I started laughing in that moment, all by myself on this trail. And it was the most joyful, loving, wholehearted laughter I've ever experienced. And there was no one around. This wasn't a performance. I wasn't laughing at a joke with other people, but it felt like that connected laughter we have as children.
Mm.
And it was the first moment in my life that I truly experienced self-love. And it was good that there was no one there, because there was nothing for my ego to latch onto or to compare or assess. It was just this beautiful epiphany in this moment that I learned that something was possible that I never even thought was absent in my life. But not only did I learn that it was possible, but from that day forward, I do everything I can to live in accordance with the amount of love that I felt for myself then is how I try and treat myself going forward. And
Massimo, you shared that so beautifully, absolutely beautifully, and descriptive. And I like how you mentioned that you were glad that you were by yourself, because there's nothing to compare it or relate it to. It just is.
yeah,
And I think that when we continue to remember those times, those moments, and continue to bring our bodies and our thoughts and our feelings back to that moment, that's really where the trick lies, right? Where we can continue being that for ourselves and others. And I wanted to take us back a little bit more, because I had a thought of this whole thing happened as you went through your own leadership course to see if it would work for you. And isn't that funny? Sometimes we develop things so quickly, so rapidly based on our experiences, our education, all the things you mentioned that you have like this scientific background, right? Where you're like, that's too woo woo. And then we start to see and feel and learn otherwise, right? But we create things so quickly. Leaders who develop self-improvement courses or what have you, we have our own. But when you go through it on your own, that's when you really learn and understand if it's effective or not. And you did that. So because you did that, you have just been able to tweak and improve for not just you, but thousands of souls.
Beautifully said, April. Yeah. I feel like I stumbled into it. I wasn't looking for this. I wasn't looking for the epiphany. I wasn't looking for self-compassion. But once I learned about it and had the epiphany, I wanted to learn everything that I could. And I studied as much as possible in the latest research and to understand what is this? What is this experience that I had in a way that I could use it. I could bring it into the programs, into the work that I was doing with my clients because it was so profound. And over the subsequent years after the epiphany, I would share with my clients, but I wasn't particularly transparent about it. And I'd share little pieces. And then after they experienced it, they'd say, hey, what is this thing we've been doing? What is this? And I tell them that, okay, it's self-compassion. And then we talk about it. But I didn't want to lead the witness because I was still vetting out, is there something here? Or did I just have a hallucination in the woods and, I'm an N of one? And as I realized more and more this was impacting people from all different backgrounds and different industries and different walks of life, that there was something to this. And the more research that I've done around self-compassion, it is truly the God particle of psychology. It is the lowest common denominator of when we think living a wellness-driven life, a life of purpose. I think that we all have one shared purpose as human beings, and that purpose is to learn to love ourselves. And we can have a secondary and a third purpose, absolutely. But there is one purpose that supersedes all of them, which is to learn and practice loving ourselves, because that is the one thing that is certain in this life, is that we will be with ourselves until we take our last breath. Nothing else is certain. And we're all worthy of love, but we cannot control the conditions of other people to give that to us. And that was Absolutely. One of the things that I learned, and that so many of my clients struggle with, is we're on this treadmill that's up and to the right. If I have more status, more power, more influence, more money, you name it, more hair, whatever you're looking for, right? More youth, that then I will be enough and I will get the love that I so desperately seek. And if we can equip ourselves to give ourselves the love that we deserve, we will still pursue it in relationships with other people, as we should, but we won't be as reliant on it. And what I have found is that when you resource yourself with compassion, we're more receptive to the kindness from others. I mean, how many times in your life have you received feedback and it's just kind of a yeah, and it goes by, as opposed to like really letting that compliment hit, like, thank you. And it can be uncomfortable at times to be seen that way, but my book just came out last month, and every time someone takes the time to share something they appreciated about reading it, I think in the past I might have been uncomfortable with that attention and brushed it off, but I look them in the eye and I say, thank you, because they're trying to give me a gift and I want them to know that I received it.
Right. Being able to receive is one thing that's difficult to do also. We have all these learning pieces of self-compassion. And so I want to get to talking about your book also, because this definitely goes into further incredible discussion. But let's get on with our commercial. So stay tuned. Are you ready to take control of your ride to wellness? Rev up with Driven Living. Visit www.drivenliving.com and buckle up for a journey. Get exclusive access to our Wellness Driven Life Show guest portal, where you can dive deep into the minds of our esteemed guests. Sign up for our newsletter and get insider scoops on these distinguished personalities. It's like having a backstage pass to their life-changing wisdom. But that's not all. You'll also receive a free hug. You heard me right. A free hug. An enlightening ebook from the Driven Living team. Discover the science-backed benefits of hugging yourself. It's a fill-up for your wellness tank. Because at Driven Living, we believe in fueling your journey to wellness, both physically and psychologically. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.drivenliving.com today. Welcome back, everyone. Here with the incredible Massimo Backus. And I'm so excited to talk a little bit further about the book that you have created based on all of your trials and tribulations, the stumbles and the getting back up and learning how this whole self-love, self-compassion, leadership works and what that looks like. So let's talk a little bit about what human first, leader second is all about.
April, a little bit ago, you mentioned that we're projecting of sorts. Our ego gets in our way, right? And that is something that we all have to grapple with. And I don't think about ego as something that we kill off. Our ego is part of us. So it is a roommate that is always going to be living in our house, in our heads, right? So we need to make sure that we have a productive and healthy relationship with our ego so that when it does get in the way, we can put it in its place, in a kind manner. And why I've titled the book Human First, Leader Second is because where I have found the executives that I work with get into trouble is when they lose sight of their humanity. They're trying to be more than human. They're trying to be mechanistic or optimize their performance or work endless hours or strive for perfection, but never be satisfied, not recognizing that we all need rest. We all need recognition. We all need white space to think creatively. We need breaks at times. And so the idea of let's come back to who we are as humans and recognize that that's a shared experience that we have. And that when we lead with our humanity, we actually are leading from a much greater place of strength than when we're leading from a place of trying to perform and impress. We're at a deficiency because we're coming from a place of need as opposed to a place of having something to offer. And leadership is really about having something to offer.
Yes. And, I've heard so many people say that, as long as we are giving, there's so much that comes back. It's that reciprocation aspect of us, right? And I think that it's incredible that you're talking about self-compassion and bringing that into leadership, the corporate arena. It is a challenge, like you mentioned before, when you first brought this into your leadership and your coaching, that you weren't exactly completely transparent about it, and people would say, hey, what are we doing here? And so what was it like when you really started being transparent about it, bringing it into the professional business arena?
Well, I found that the first step to doing that was that I needed to go first because, like me, many of the people that I work with are pretty cynical of the notion of, wait a second, you want me to be kind to myself? That sounds like a bunch of malarkey. Like I'm too busy for that. Or if I'm kind to myself, I might lose my edge because the fact that I'm so driven is because I always want more because I'm hungry. And so we have to debunk a lot of these myths. And I have found one of the easiest ways to do that is by sharing my story and leading by example. Because I am all of those things. I don't want to lose my edge. I'm ambitious. I'm driven. And I also have a great capacity to be kind to myself. And so when people see that, it's an invitation for them to join me. When I share my story in a way that is vulnerable, not to manipulate or trauma bomb them or say, who's had a harder road to success, but to say what may appear is not what is. On the outside, I may look like a successful, well-polished person, and it was a straight path to success, and I'm an author and all this, and that's like, it couldn't be further from the truth. I hit rock bottom many, many times, and here's how I got back up. So that's been like one starting place for people. The other is to help them start really small. This whole notion of self-love is daunting. I mean, remind you that I stumbled into it. If someone said you're going to go to this retreat and you're going to learn to love yourself,
You wouldn't have gone.
I probably wouldn't have gone. I would have been terrified even by the notion of it. So I try to introduce this to people in very small ways. And the way that the book is structured, it introduces essentially 6 different approaches to get into a practice of self-compassion. And then each one of those 6 approaches has a number of different kind of small exercises that people can try. And it's a choose your own adventure. It's try these different things out and see what works for you. I was just talking to a client yesterday, and they said one of the most profound things that they learned about self-compassion and how to access it is simply putting their hand on their chest and saying to themselves, I've
Mm,
got you. I've got you.
yeah.
And, scientifically, that engages like our mammalian network, and we know that it gives us our oxytocin, and there's all the science behind it. But the simple gesture of like, I've got you. How many times in a day are we at a moment of, panic, anxiety, stress, to be able to remind ourselves, I've got you? And to be able to do that, you have to have a healthy relationship with your ego, because on the other side of that ego is a defense mechanism that is trying to protect you. And anxiety and stress and worry and people pleasing and perfectionism and defensiveness and being controlling and so on and so forth are all maladaptive defense mechanisms that we created when we were young. And they may have served us then, but they no longer serve us now. People have talked about
Mm,
as our saboteurs or inner critics and all of that. But I have found that the literature up to date has largely vilified this part of our psychology. We should get rid of our inner critic or our saboteur. We need to silence it. And I fundamentally disagree. I think what we need to do is be in an active, loving relationship to it, which sounds something like, for me, being defensive is, I'm being defensive. Well, you must be worried that you're being judged right now.
mm,
You're not. You're surrounded by people that support you. Or this comment wasn't intended to hurt you. The feedback was intended to help you. So we're good. And what that does is it lets my defensive part of my psychology go, okay, I'm off the hook. I don't need to step in and help because Moss has got it.
ah, that's a very, very cool tip and how to, reword that, restructure that, and really calm that piece of ourselves. And you're absolutely right. It is a piece of us that we need. We have to be able, it's a safety mechanism. It's built in. It's not like we should destroy that because it's just a part of who we are. You can't really destroy it. Like you said, that's it's never going away. You get to learn to live with it, and you get to learn how to reprogram the I like to call us the robot, right? The body is a robot controlled by the mind. So how do we reprogram that? And I think that's a very cool way to speak to yourself. And also, I got you. I mean, knowing that we are uh, in charge of ourselves, and we really are the only ones to be able to care for ourselves and love ourselves. Again, going to that self-compassion piece, it starts with us. And when we do the work for ourselves and love ourselves, that's when it just emanates out to everything and everyone all around us. It just always starts with us. So I think that's very, very cool.
It has been the greatest gift in my life because it has changed every relationship that I have with other people.
Yeah.
Um, my relationship with my wife is fundamentally different today, um, because I've just learned to be kinder to myself. And I didn't realize how under attack we can all be by our inner kind of dialogue, how harsh we can be to ourselves. It's brutal. And so going back to the topic of self-awareness, we need to become aware of when that's happening, but not beat ourselves up more for beating ourselves up. We need to be able to acknowledge, hey, why is that happening? And replace it with something kinder.
Ah, so I would love to know, because you gave us a lot of cool tips already, but what are some of the things that you do on a daily basis to help kind of tone down the way that we talk to each other? Because you're right. I mean, we have, I don't know, I don't even know the number right now. It does not come to my head, but the amount of negative thoughts that we have, which is natural, right? So, what are some of the things that you do on a daily basis to help alleviate that and have that self compassion?
April, there are so many things that I do, and I'm not the most habitual person. So I need to have a lot of different tools, because some days I'm going to go to one and the other day it'll be something different. But I'll share with you a few that have been tremendously powerful for me and many people that I work with. And one of them is when we get caught in that chatter and we find ourselves spiraling or something, to determine what's the appropriate amount of effort for the problem we've identified. When we start catastrophizing, we create something that is much bigger and more severe than it really is, and we give it a lot of energy. So if we can right size, what's the real problem here, and is it worth that? Just this past weekend, I was spun up about some different family dynamics at my son's school and kids bullying and whatnot. And I had to catch myself and go, like, what's most important here is for me to be there for my son. I can't control what these other families are doing or what they're thinking about. And even if I think I know, I'm making stuff up. I really don't know the truth. So I was able to stop myself from spiraling. So matching the effort towards the problem, I think, is one thing. Another is every day before I go to sleep, I go through a list of things I'm grateful for and that I appreciate. And the gratitude is, what am I grateful for in my life? And the trick to this is to not judge yourself for what you're grateful for. So I live in Seattle, Washington. It's pretty gray. On a sunny day, I might be grateful that I got to be outside on a sunny day. And I might do that a few days in a row. Now, someone might judge themselves and go, well, are you really grateful for it if you keep picking the same thing? As opposed to, yeah, I'm actually really grateful for this beautiful weather while it's here.
Yeah,
So
because it's a different day.
Exactly. And then around appreciation is, what did I appreciate about myself that day? Whether it was how hard I worked, my resilience in a difficult conversation, my patience, my curiosity, the fact that I was even just kind to myself that day. Whatever it might be. And some days it's easy, and some days it's really hard to find the things that I appreciate about myself. But that's a simple practice that started with me writing it down, and now it's just something that I do in my mind before going to sleep. And I find it makes a really big difference, because then I don't have to work hard to think about all the things I have to be grateful for in my life, or the things that I appreciate about myself. They're right there. They're available because I've made space for them every day, and it doesn't take any time. I'm laying in bed, I'm going to sleep, I'm not doing anything else. And it's a nice way to nod off. Yeah.
That is so cool. And, gratitude is one of those things that so many of the experts and the leaders say is one of those essential pieces to really having a wellness driven life, right? It is something that once we start doing it, like you're talking about, it comes to us much easier. And to not allow yourself to be like, well, I don't know if that's really worthy or what have you. Of course it is, because it's a different day. And if you truly felt grateful for the experience and the sun hitting you at that very moment, then you are. And I think that that feeling piece is really essential too. Like, you really feel grateful for something. And I also really appreciate the thought and the awareness of the thoughts that we're having. We're out and about, we're in community, and all of a sudden we feel this, we're not jibing so much with somebody, but what do you really want to put your energy towards? And so we all do it. I do it often, and I have to remind myself the same thing. April, what are you putting your energy towards? Do you really want to put the energy towards that? Probably not. Let's start thinking about what the next thing is I'm creating, and then you just start gearing it otherwise. Massimo, it's been incredible having you on the show. I want to make sure that everyone knows where to find you. We've had it displayed on the screen. For those of you watching, MassimoBackus.com. It is also in the description below for those of you listening in and viewing afterwards. So I would love to know, what are you most excited about creating next?
Oh my gosh, April, there's so many things I'm excited about creating next. But right now, I think that the thing I'm probably most focused on is getting the word out about my book, Human First, Leader Second. This is like a life's purpose thing for me. It's a part of my business, but it feels like so much more. When I had that epiphany in the woods, I made a decision on that day that I was going to choose a life where I love myself every day for the rest of my life. That was going to be my purpose. And I want to share that with as many people as possible. It's not about the destination. This isn't a certification we get. There's no box to check. It's not a to-do list. It is a way of living. It is every day an opportunity to be kind and loving towards ourselves so we can be that same way for the people around us. And the book and all of my work is about trying to introduce other people to the conditions so they can have their own epiphany and choose the same similar path that I've chosen.
I love how you said that they can have their own epiphany. And isn't that what it's about? Where people, you give them the information and then they get their own aha moments all by themselves. And it's so cool to witness. It's been amazing. And I assume that everyone can access your book via your website. Is that correct? What's the best way to be able to grab a copy of that?
My website or any of the major retailers. And for those that do read it, please reach out to me. Let me know what you think, what resonated, what didn't make sense. I fundamentally believe that if we can come from a place of curiosity and non-judgment, we can connect with each other. And I can't imagine a world being worse off if people learned to be more loving to themselves so they can be more loving to each other.
That's very, very well said at the ending of this. Thank you again. Uh, Massimo, you've been a wonderful guest. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your stories, your insight, being vulnerable with us and our audience. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. And thank you so much to our audience, because without you, the show wouldn't be possible. So thank you so much. Goodbye for now.
Thank
And
you,
we will
April.
see you. You are so welcome.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.